Welcome back, in part 3 of Steam. Anyways, let's continue.
Valve introduced the Steam hardware survey in 2003 ahead of the release of Half-Life 2.
At that time, no information was available as to the distribution of CPU and GPU units among gamers. So Valve used the survey, which automatically collected hardware information with a user's permission through the Steam client. To collect this information and refine the hardware targets for Half-Life 2 to meet the widest possible specifications.
Since then, Valve continues to use the Steam hardware survey to collect hardware distribution information, sharing the net results with other developers to understand the current market, as well as to make choices on when to discontinue support for older hardware and software. Steam was originally released exclusively for Microsoft Windows in 2003, but has since been ported to other platforms.
More recent Steam client versions use the Chromium embedded framework.
To take advantage of some of its features for newer interface elements, Steam uses 64-bit versions of Chromium, which makes it unsupported on older operating systems such as Windows XP and Windows Vista.
Steam on Windows also relies on some security features built into later versions of Windows.
Support for XP and Vista was dropped in 2019.
While users still on those operating systems can use the client, they do not have access to newer features.
Around 0.2% of Steam users were affected by this when it began.
In March 2023, Valve announced that Steam would drop support for Windows 7 and 8 on January 1, 2024.
Valve announced a client for Mac OS in March 2010.
The announcement was preceded by a change in the Steam Data Client to support the cross-platform WebKit web browser rendering engine instead of the Trident engine of Internet Explorer.
Valve teased the release by emailing several images from Mac community and gaming websites. The images featured characters from Valve games, with Apple logos and parodies of vintage Macintosh advertisements.
Valve developed a full video homage to Apple's 1984 Macintosh commercial to announce the availability of Half-Life 2 on the service. Some concept images for the video had previously been used to tease the Mac Steam client.
Steam for Mac OS was originally planned for release in April 2010 before being pushed back to May 12, 2010.
In addition to the Steam client, several features were made available to developers, allowing them to take advantage of the cross-platform Source Engine and Steamworks platform and network capabilities.
Through the Steam Play functionality, the Mac OS client allows players who have purchased compatible products in the Windows version to download the Mac versions at no cost.
The Steam Cloud, along with many multiplayer PC games, also supports cross-platform play.
With Apple discontinuing support for Intel-based Macs after the release of Mac OS Tahoe in late 2025 in favor of Apple Silicon, Valve updated the beta version of the Steam client to include native support for Apple Silicon without the need for emulation via Rosetta 2. In July 2012, Valve announced that it was developing a client for Linux based on the Ubuntu distribution.
This announcement followed months of speculation, primarily from the website Phoronix that had discovered evidence of Linux developing in recent builds of Steam and other Valve games.
Newell stated that getting Steam and games to work on Linux is a key strategy for Valve. Newell called the closed nature of Microsoft Windows 8 a catastrophe for everyone in the PC space, and that Linux would maintain the openness of the platform.
Valve is extending support to any developers that want to bring their games to Linux by making it as easy as possible for anybody who's engaged with us, putting their games on Steam and getting those running on Linux, according to Newell.
The team developing the Linux client had been working for a year before the announcement to validate that such support would be possible.
As of the official announcement, a near feature-complete Steam client for Linux had been developed and successfully run on Ubuntu.
Internal beta testing of the Linux client started in October 2012. External beta testing occurred in early November the same year.
Open beta clients for Linux were made available in late December 2012, and the client was officially released in mid-February 2013.
At the time of announcement, Valve's Linux division assured consumers that its first game on the OS, Left 4 Dead 2, would run at an acceptable frame rate and with a degree of connectivity with Windows and Mac OS X versions.
From there, it began working on porting other games to Ubuntu and expanding to other Linux distributions.
Versions of Steam working under Fedora and Red Hat Enterprise Linux were released by October 2015.
There were over 500 Linux-compatible games on Steam in June 2014, and in February 2019. Steam for Linux had 5,800 native games and was described as having the power to keep Linux gaming alive by a gadget.
In August 2018, Valve released a beta version of Proton, named Steam Play, an open-source Windows compatibility layer for Linux, so that Linux users could run Windows games on Linux directly through Steam.
Proton comprises a set of open-source tools including Wine and the XVK.
The software allows the use of Steam-supported controllers, even those not compatible with Windows.
Released in February 2022, Valve's handheld computer, the Steam Deck, runs SteamOS 3.0, which is based on Arch Linux and uses Proton to support Windows-based games without native Linux ports.
Prior to the Steam Deck's release, Valve worked with various middleware developers to make sure their tools were compatible with Proton on Linux and maximize the number of games that the Steam Deck would support.
This included working with various anti-cheat developers such as Easy Anti-Cheat and Badlive to make sure their solutions worked with Proton.
To help with compatibility, Valve developed a classification system to rank games based on how well they performed on Steam Deck out of the box. Support for NVIDIA's proprietary deep learning supersampling, DLSS, on supported video cards and games was added to Proton in June 2021, though this is not available on the Steam Deck, which is based on AMD hardware. In March 2022, Google offered a pre-release version of Steam on Chromebooks and entered public beta in November 2022.
In August 2025, Google announced that it will end Steam for Chromebook support in 2026.
At E3 2010, Newell announced that Steamworks would arrive on the PlayStation 3 with Portal 2.
Steamworks made its debut on consoles with Portal 2's PlayStation 3 release.
Several features, including cross-platform play and instant messaging, Steam Cloud for saved games, and the ability for PS3 owners to download Portal 2 from Steam, Windows and Mac, were offered.
Valve's Counter-Strike Global Offensive also supports Steamworks and cross-platform features on the PlayStation 3, including using keyboard and mouse controls as an alternative to the gamepad.
Valve said it hopes to expand upon this foundation with more Steam features and functionality in DLC and future content releases. Newell said that it would have liked to bring the service to the Xbox 360 through the game Counter-Strike Global Offensive, but later said that cross-platform play would not be present in the final version of the game.
Valve attributes the inability to use Steamworks on the Xbox 360 to limitations in the Xbox Live regulations of the ability to deliver patches and new content.
Valve's Eric Johnson stated that Microsoft required new content on the console to be certified and validated before distribution, which would limit the usefulness of Steamworks' delivery approach. Valve released an official Steam client for iOS and Android devices in late January 2012, following a short beta period.
The application allows players to log into their accounts to browse the storefront, manage their games, and communicate with friends in the Steam community.
The application also incorporates a two-factor authentication system that works with Steam Guard.
Newell stated that the application was a strong request from Steam users and sees it as a means to make Steam richer and more accessible for everyone.
A mobile Steam client for Windows Phone devices was released in June 2016.
In May 2019, a mobile chat-only client for Steam was released under the name Steam Chat.
On May 14, 2018, the Steam Link app with remote play features was released in beta to allow users to stream games to Android phones, named after discontinued set-top box Steam Link.
Whoa! It was also submitted to the iOS App Store, but was denied by Apple Incorporated, who cited business conflicts with app guidelines.
Apple later clarified its rule at the following Apple Worldwide Developers Conference in early June, in that iOS apps may not offer an app-like purchasing store, but does not restrict apps that provide remote desktop support.
In response, Valve removed the ability to purchase games or other content through the app and resubmitted it for approval in June 2018, where it was accepted by Apple and allowed on its store in May 2019.
Steam Video for video streaming was also announced but not released. Valve released SteamOS in 2015, a customized Linux-based operating system designed to support the use of Steam and playing Linux native games.
It was released alongside Valve's original Steam Machine concept, a minimum specification for other hardware manufacturers to prepare computers to use SteamOS directly.
Additional hardware were also released to support Steam machines, including the first generation of the Steam controller and the Steam Link, a set-top box that allowed streaming from a computer to a television display. But the initial concept for Steam machines did not gain much traction, with the concept shelved around 2018. Valve continued to develop SteamOS, making it available for users making their own computers.
Valve also developed Proton, a software emulation layer that allowed most Windows games to run on Linux without any modification.
With lessons learned from Steam machines, Valve released the Steam Deck, a handheld gaming computer running an updated version of Steam OS with Proton, in February 2022.
Updates to Steam and SteamOS at this time included better Proton layer support for Windows-based games, improved user interface features in the Steam client for the Steam Deck display, and added dynamic cloud saves to Steam to allow synchronizing saved games while a game is being played.
Valve began marking all games on the service through a Steam Deck validated program to indicate how compatible they were with the Steam Deck software, and including this information on the Steam storefront pages.
The validation program considered aspects such as the performance of the game's graphics, legibility of in-game text and icons on the Steam Deck screen, user input limitations, and similar factors, with games rated as either verified, playable, and unsupported, the latter typically applying to games that require a Windows-only form of digital rights management.
The Steam Deck was successful and led Valve to develop its own standalone Steam machine gaming computer, released in June 2026, and the Steam Frame virtual reality headset, alongside a second-generation Steam controller.
Valve extended the Steam Deck verification program to cover both the new Steam Machine and Steam Frame, with the release of the Steam Machine.
Valve included beta support for Steam Cloud Play in May 2020 for developers to allow users to play games in their library, which developers and publishers have opted to allow in a cloud gaming service.
At launch, Steam Cloud Play only worked through NVIDIA's GeForce Now service and would link up to other cloud services in the future, though whether Valve would run its own cloud gaming service was unclear.
China has strict regulations on video games and internet use. However, access to Steam is allowed through China's governmental firewalls.
Currently, a large portion of Steam users are from China.
By November 2017, more than half of the Steam user base was fluent in Chinese, an effect created by the large popularity of Dota 2 and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds in the country. And several developers have reported that Chinese players make up close to 30% of the total players for their games. Following a Chinese government-ordered temporary block of many of Steam's functions, in December 2017, Valve and Perfect World announced they would help to provide an officially sanctioned version of Steam that meets Chinese internet requirements.
Perfect World has worked with Valve before to help bring Dota 2 and Counter-Strike Global Offensive to the country through approved government processes.
All games to be released on Steam China are expected to pass through the government approval process and meet other governmental requirements, such as requiring a Chinese company to run any game with an online presence. The platform is known locally as Steam Platform Zingy Pinte and runs independently from the rest of Steam.
It was made to comply with China's strict regulations on video games.
Valve does not plan to prevent Chinese users from accessing the global Steam platform and will try to assure that a player's cloud data remains usable between the two.
The client launched as an open beta on February 9, 2021, with about 40 games available at launch.
As of December 2021, only around 100 games that have been reviewed and licensed by the government are available through Steam China. On December 25, 2021, reports emerged that Steam's global service was the target of a domain name system attack that prevented users in China from accessing its site.
The Chinese Government Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, MIIT, later confirmed that Chinese gamers would no longer be able to use Steam's global service as its international domain name has been designated as illegal.
The block has effectively locked all Chinese users out of games they had purchased through Steam's international service.
In 2023, reports emerged that the Steam store could be used as normal in China while the Steam community was still blocked. We will continue more about Steam in final part 4. Again, stay tuned.